Hi, Roy here. I thought I'd pop in to talk about my second week of Garbaugust reading. So, you probably know the score with Garbaugust. It's a month of celebrating trashy, undemanding, pleasurable reads with perhaps not quite the elevated literary qualities that we would normally be reading the other 11 months of the year. So, this event was created by Criminally. There are various co-hosts as well, all great channels, all listed down below. I'm one of them. And there are weekly prompts for those who like such things, the second of which is shock value. So books that hook the reader in with some sort of promise of sex and or violence. So, what could fit the bill better than a book that was banned in the UK, that was destroyed at least 18 times? There were orders made to destroy stocks of this particular book, as well as a number of others, by the author. The author was put on trial. The publishers were put on trial and fined and sent to prison. Actual prison. The author was so notorious that when he was interviewed on television a few years later, he wore a mask. Might have been for effect, I suppose. Questions were asked in Parliament about this author's books, which were withdrawn from sale from the naffy shops on military bases. Yes, too shocking for the military. So I'm talking about Hank Janson. Hank Janson, both character and notionally the author of a series of books, long series of books, published over here from the late 40s through to I think the very beginning of the 70s. And Hank Janson is an investigative reporter in Chicago, and they're basically hard-boiled, torrid tales with lashings of lascivious content as well. So some of these, a group of 7 of the books, were subject to the bans and the trials that I mentioned. There was rumoured to be 2 tons of unsold Hank Janson books kept in a special room in Scotland Yard. So I thought it'd be good to read one. Fortunately, some of these have been reissued by Telos Publishing, including some of the super banned ones from the early 50s. So I read one called Killer on Kindle. I've got some others as well. I mean, they're great vintage paperbacks to collect if you like that sort of thing. Have a look at Gavin, Genre Books. He covers a Hank Janson as well called Top 10 and gives some other interesting context about the way these books sort of came about and their popularity at the time. Yeah, it's not the best written book in the world. You know, there's one pair of pages where the word leaden appears about 8 times. And it's a bit ridiculous that he's perpetually priapic. But that said, it was a pretty good crime story. You know, it's very much in the noir vein. You got your femme fatale, that sort of thing. He's a reporter, but he's also effectively a detective trying to get to the sort of truth of things. Big and tough, but he's not a Superman. He gets beaten, shot at, all sorts of things happen to him. And he's got some peculiar vulnerabilities, written in the first person. Yes, they're trashy. I think they came out at incredible rapidity and in vast volume, hence the moral panic. So, you know, this is not so much, or not just, books that would sort of hit the buttons of the time of things that people were concerned about in the public world, but also themselves are a kind of, you know, a bit like video nasties. Isn't it dreadful? You know, young people reading Hank Janson, you know, was said in a trial. Some criminal had Hank Janson on. That was his favourite reading. I can't see. Basically, if killer is obscene, I think virtually all books are obscene. Lots and lots of books are obscene. Yes, it's ridiculous in its sexual content, but it's not literally pornographic. It's just a kind of souped up American style hard-boiled story, and basically a lot of fun with some surprising moments as well. So that was Hank Janson. From there, I moved on to Freaks. Freaks, a New English Library publication. New English Library, Nell, published lots of exploitation type paperbacks, particularly picking up on current trends. So the Richard Allen books with skinheads and such like being a good example, and the Hell's Angel ones. So Freaks looks like it's doing the same sort of job for hippies and dropouts, you know. So we're promised a novel of today's dropouts and their hang-ups. We're promised chaos and crisis, a communal house, 5 men and 2 women, drug abuse, sexual antics, and political activism. It's a bit more literary than, say, the skinhead books. The guy, Doug Lang, who wrote it, is, like the hero of the book, is a poet from Wales. I think he passed away, actually, fairly recently. He had a long career as a poet and teacher, short career producing this novel and another one which was under a pseudonym. And it's a little bit more... It's got a little bit of experimentalism about it, like there's no quotation marks, there's some poetry in it. It's also sort of dreadful in that it seems like nothing's really happening. You know, basically you've got this guy who he gets an income from his poetry and such like, and he has a house in Ladbroke Grove. Very evocative, and various dropouts live there, and they're continually taking drugs and having sex, sometimes at the same time, and there are some misadventures like the political activism and run-ins with the law and that kind of thing, and obviously there's relationship entanglements. It's like a latter-day beat novel. And I suspect Lawrence James was an editor for New English Library, as well as being a writer of some of those like Hell's Angel books and things like that. He was really into the beat generation. Actually, New English Library published The Electric Underground, an anthology of beat writing that Lawrence James edited. He was keen on all that. He was plugged into the underground. He probably knew the guy. It's sort of a shame in a way that there aren't more books about this period, I think. Maybe there are and I just haven't come across them, because it is really interesting. This one apparently written in a few weeks, disowned by the author. It isn't the great one, but it's certainly an interesting artefact of its time. Pretty short as well. Really, the action of the book, such as it is a sort of self-reflection of like, what are we doing? What's it all about? Just going from stupor to stupor. But yeah, read that. Freaks. So that was my, on the bingo card, so as well as the themed weeks, there's Garbingo, with some prompts there. So I would count this as topical trash because it was sort of appealing to the prurient interest of people wondering what goes on in these communal houses and that kind of thing. Freaks, Doug Lang. Moving on to a Guy N. Smith book called The Black Fedora. So Guy N. Smith I thought of him as a Paperbacks from Hell type of writer, and I think his early books were killer animals. This is quite late, it's 1991, so I'm actually not sure I've achieved the Paperback from Hell prompt, really, although I've approached it in good faith. So, the Black Fedora, we're back with hippies, early 90s style, again, topical, the Peace Convoy, what also got called New Age Travellers, although those words are never in this. Basically, a later generation of hippies on the move, so it's almost worse. They're not pinned down in their communes, they're driving around in these great convoys of Mad Max vehicles. And the character, scary guy, wears a black fedora all the time. He kind of hitches a ride in the convoy, that's part of it. There's also, they're heading for Lichfield, which is a cathedral town in the middle of England, and where there's going to be a festival, and there's various things going on. There's rumours of the Antichrist. There's a visiting dignitary who may or may not be a descendant of Jack the Ripper. There's who might also be subject to an assassination attempt. There's a police like chief inspector or something, trying to hold it all together and getting a lot of stress, perhaps understandably. So there's these sort of satanic undertones, and the Lichfield Gospels, they might be attacked by the peace convoy people. Guy N. Smith is not sympathetic to the dirty hippies at all. Like a lot of this sort of fiction, it's actually quite... implicitly, at least, it's quite sort of keep the status quo. You know, it's almost on the side of the straights. Anyway, yes, and this is a bit like torn from today's headlines. Because of extreme animal activism, they want to attack the Gospels because they're printed on vellum. So lots of things happen. It's a pulp thriller, pretty entertaining. I enjoyed it. Not least because I know the places where it's set, and first of a series apparently, but not really a horror book. So yep, good, but I'm still left a little bit wanting in the Paperbacks from Hell department, but I've got some ideas up my sleeve. Then what could be more shock value than a notorious book and movie that was a cause célèbre at the time, widely read, best-selling book, popular movie, if not critically acclaimed, and the book was last year's group read, Valley of the Dolls. Well, I wasn't going to read it again, but I have read Dolls, Dolls, Dolls by Stephen Rebello, which is a non-fiction book, so I'm hitting a non-fiction trash square. Winner of the effective use of CMYK printing, I think, on the cover. So this is all the stuff about the book and the movie and its follow-ups and its cultural impact, written in an affectionate way, but accepting that the book's fairly trashy and the film didn't deliver really what was expected, and it's become a sort of camp classic, known partly from screenings where people sort of shout out lines of dialogue and things like that as it's the gay Sound of Music. I thought that was the Sound of Music, but anyway, it's sort of got that status. Did watch the movie, and I can see people's point. It's certainly worth watching though. It isn't terrible. But it wasn't, there was a furore. The book was like a big, big, big thing. I remember it being talked about. So we're talking like, I think book came out 1967 and then the movie, or was the book, in the mid-60s anyway. As a kid, grown-ups were like talking about this Valley of the Dolls, and I was, with sort of, in a way I didn't understand and with disapproval, I was envisaging this valley full of dolls, like children's dolls, thousands of them. Maybe that would be better. But anyway, I like it all, and this book, it goes into all the ins and outs of it, the feuding, the creative choices, the things that could have been, the Harlan Ellison script that was the first script for the movie that didn't get made, stuff like that. It's not sort of Hollywood Babylon exactly. It does sort of delve into the lives of the performers, and is very, very down on the director of the movie. I can't comment on how fair that ultimately is, but yeah, very readable, great book. And if you've read the book, seen the film, this is a great accompaniment to it. Then, what could be better for Shock Value Week than a men's adventure book, because that's a Garbingo square, and one that's written under a pseudonym and with green on the cover. So I turn once again to the adventures of Nick Carter. Nick Carter, whose previous incarnations as a detective don't seem to have any impact on his 60s through to, well, maybe it's late 50s, on his mid-century life as a super spy, N3 Killmaster, working for Axe. I think when I was waving this around sort of in TBR mode, I was saying, what's with this double-headed Axe? The organisation he works for is AXE, so I guess that's what it's all about. This particular one, Carnival for Killing. They tend to be set in some overseas location. Some of the titles are just like the name of a city or a country. So this one is set in Rio, where they have a carnival that becomes a carnival for killing. And that phrase is actually used in the narrative. I always sort of applaud when that happens. So again, they're quick reads. I've read it in a couple of evenings. What is it? 150 pages. It's kind of souped up James Bond, very straightforward, delivers all the gratification you'd expect. Once again, you've got a priapic character. I wonder how these guys can actually walk around, to be honest. And I think between this and Hank Janson and the Jilly Cooper the week before, I've probably read the term pointed breasts about 80 times. But, that's what people wanted at the time. But it's a pretty good adventure. The Brazilian setting's fun. There is a big climax at the carnival. And it's another Nick Carter. It goes in, it comes out. Probably won't change anybody's life. But I enjoyed that. And then, moving on to the world of Atlanteans, Dominators, Olympians and Titans on journeys. I mean, of course, Buss's Annual 1986. So this I got for the wouldn't read on a bus prompt on the Garbingo card, on the basis that I thought being thought as some kind of bus spotter would be a bad thing. Now I've read this, I think I'm jealous of people who have that hobby. It's the best hobby ever. Not only can you travel around, you can get to know things like, lots of arcane details about the vehicles and the companies. You can have your favourite engine noise and all sorts of cool stuff. And this book, I guess, being pretty old as well, there's lots of nostalgia in the photos, the sort of graphics on the buses. It's really well written. Some of the sort of political wranglings amongst the companies to get franchises and things like that, like in the Jilly Cooper book. They're interesting, and there's a great travelogue where a couple of guys set off to cross the country from, Hull to New Brighton with no plan, just to use buses all the time. So they don't take timetables, they don't, apart from sort of navigating by the sun, they just get a bus to somewhere and then get the next bus and so on. That's a good read, although it's rather unkind about some northern towns in a fairly amusing way. And some of the vehicles have got really cool names, like Atlanteans. I didn't know I was riding around in Atlanteans in the 80s, but I was. Ditto Dominators, Titans and Olympians. So Bus's Annual was a surprisingly good read and a lot of fun, and like I say, there's lots of interesting nostalgia in here as well. So I think that has been my shock value week. Back soon for Cosy week.